All right, Jason, great to see you. Great to connect. I'm looking forward to talking with you a little bit more around some of the things you've discovered. So, what have you been up to, man? It's been a long time since we've talked. How are
It
you
has
doing?
been. I was trying to figure out how long we've known each other, probably 15 years at this
Yeah,
point.
15 years. Yeah, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, hard to believe. Yeah, so most people know me from Vantage Point Performance, where I wrote Cracking the Sales Management Code. Um, Had a good run there for 10 years. Needed a new challenge. And so for the last almost 6 years, I've been doing something kind of interesting, which kind of gets into some of the storylines here, which is um, private equity companies started calling me and asking me to serve as an interim executive, so an interim chief revenue officer, interim HR VP of sales. Um, Sometimes they had a role that the person got tossed, and I was just filling in for 3 or 4 months till they found a replacement. Sometimes I stayed there for 9 months.
So, like some of the operating companies underneath a private equity firm?
Yeah. So the
Perfect.
portfolio companies that they owned, I would slot in, and in a lot of cases, there had never been a chief revenue officer, so I was kind of introducing marketing capabilities and tightening up the sales process and redoing incentive plans and hiring and building the sales team. And so it was after a decade of consulting and then a decade of training, at least probably more than that. Um, it was kind of liberating to actually be in the role, in the seat. You can make your own decisions. It's like being let out of prison to some extent. So it's been interesting, and I started to experience some of the problems that I saw before. I started to experience them very differently because I own them. Right before, as a consultant, you pass through and you help, you add value, but you don't own the issues. And for the last 6 years, I've owned them, and it's really reframed my thinking on a lot of issues, especially pipeline
I just
management.
love that. I love the fact that you had to own them, right? I mean, it's because I've been a consultant and a VP of sales, and now you were rolling and started as a consultant, moving into the VP of sales. It was fun when your consultant, I love to do it, is come in and tell them that their baby's ugly, try to help them make their baby ugly, ugly, if you will. But it was really kind of different where you could see that the baby was ugly and you had to fix it, right? So that's kind of fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's skin in the game then.
as a consultant, no one's asking you about your number,
No.
and no one's asking you for deal details and all the pipeline opportunities. So anyway, it's been a fascinating past few years, kind of working in this different capacity. It's been actually in many ways rewarding, but more frustrating too.
And that was, I think, that was kind of the origination. So tell me, so you, because I see you talking about it, you have a new program, around pipeline management, pipeline meetings, and things. But so was this the, being responsible and now being the sales leader, that was the cause of your
Yes.
project, or?
Yeah. So if you went back and looked at my research and writing from a decade ago, I was kind of onto the sales pipeline because I think there's a lot of silly stuff people have done with it. But it wasn't really until I started sitting in on these meetings with my managers and their reps, and I was like, this is bad. Like, this is very, very bad. And I mean, we can talk about some of the worst and best practices. I'm sure we will, but it's just, if you look at these meetings where you have 10 folks sitting in a call for 90 minutes and they're going through individual deal after individual deal, and only two people are paying attention at any given time because there's one person reading it's already there. Or it should be anyway. And the amount of time that was wasted and the amount of impact that was coming from those meetings was just tragic. And so the program started as one day I just sat down one evening with a beer and I was like, all right, what's all the stuff I think is wrong here with pipeline management? And I mean, everyone will know these. Like, I didn't have faith that the information in CRM was accurate and up to date. I didn't believe the win rates were accurate. They weren't filling the funnel fast enough with opportunities. They were focused on chasing late stage deals. I mean, all the stuff, forecast, erratic forecasts, I think, go back to how you're managing the sales pipeline. I mean, a lot of people don't differentiate pipeline management from forecasting because the reason they have the pipeline is to choose a close date and assign a percentage to it, which is also called forecasting, not pipeline management. But if you tighten up the sales process, the milestones and some other things, you can improve forecast because it's really the foundation. It's the backbone of what most people are using for forecasts. So I literally just made a list of all the things that I thought were broken. And then thought, okay, well, if I were going to build a training program, what would I, because I've been a trainer, right? I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
What would be my learning objectives? How would I build some exercises around it? What kind of intellectual property should I pull forward to kind of build the case? And we ended up something that's very tactical. It's literally the program We can talk about it as much or as little as you want, but the program is literally, how do I conduct productive pipeline meetings? It's not a huge strategic piece of intellectual property. It's literally, what do I need to get from these meetings as a sales manager? And what's the most efficient and effective way I can do that while adding coaching and adding value along the way? So it's very, very tactical, the questions that I was trying to ask, but it was driven by seeing a bunch of meetings. And I thought this is just such a
It's
waste
not
of
working.
time. I'd rather them not have these meetings and be out selling than to have 10 people in an hour and a half long meeting.
Because I go back to the cracking the sales management code, right? One of my all-time favorites. And we were training it together. Well,
Mhm.
I think we did train it a couple times together.
Yeah.
But the management funnel, I remember the key point, which I still use today, is differentiating a forecast pipeline management call from coaching, right? Because so often you see that sales managers look at forecast call is a coaching call, and they're two separate entities. And really what you're saying here is like, hey, even separating those two, you're still seeing a miserable experience inside of, just that pipeline slash forecast call, right? And we might even separate those two. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Is this program's about?
Yeah. So, well, it's one piece of it is the kind of management process or the management cadence, if you will, that you use. So let me just give you an example. So I was working as a consultant a couple of years ago, a company owned by a private equity company, and so I was working with the management team, and I basically said, okay, what are the things you need to accomplish as a sales manager? And so we need to, update the forecast, review the sales pipeline. The salespeople aren't doing enough prospecting. So, the typical list of things that you hear. And I said, okay, well, let's design a set of meetings around this. And so before they were having like a weekly, each of the managers was having a weekly hour-long meeting, I think somewhere 9 minutes. One may have been 45 because there weren't that many salespeople. They were just going through the classic pipeline review call, right? Going through the deals one by one. Salesperson, you have the stage for 5 to 7 minutes, update me, which is like the most selfish meeting ever devised, when the sales manager has all these people come together just to update them on deals. The data should be in CRM. Anyway, they came up with something different. So they said, okay, we're going to have once a month team meetings where we're going to do industry updates. We're going to have guest speakers. We're going to have like one-to-many communication. They said, but instead of having this hour-long meeting every week, with each salesperson meet for 15 to 30 minutes, right? So basically take the time they would have had in that team meeting, put it in a venue, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on what rep it was and how much coaching they thought they needed. And they said, we're also going to institute a prospecting call. So a completely separate call where we're just going to go through, and I think they were doing that once a month for 45 minutes with each of their reps, just to go through what prospecting are you doing, and they had setting activity targets and how many calls, how many meetings, how many stuff. So, they took this 1 hour-long meeting with all their sales reps and basically blew it up into one monthly meeting with all the sales reps, and then 2 separate meetings, one to, coach through the pipeline and look at near-term deals that are about to close and need support and resources, a completely separate one to talk about prospecting. And it was pretty impactful. That basically they created a venue for all the coaching they wanted to take place rather than hoping it happened.
So actually, in this case, so kind of I'm going back to cracking, right? And is separating a forecast pipeline call to a coaching call. Now you've taken it and said, hey, let's just do a pipeline call, and there might be some coaching in there, but we're really getting into looking at each of the deals individually, one-on-one with your people type of thing.
Yeah.
Building that cadence.
Exactly. Because coaching can't take place in a team meeting, I don't think. Not good
No, I
coaching.
agree.
Someone once told me, you praise people in public and you scold them in private. And like a lot of coaching calls can be, it can be a hard conversation. Like you don't want to put someone on the defense and ask them why they're not prospecting and ask them
Right.
why they didn't do this and that for that deal. So it's just a team meeting is a one-to-many communication, and coaching is a one-on-one kind of hand-to-hand combat. And so, yeah, taking them out of these meetings where 8 of the 10 people aren't paying any attention at any given time, and putting them into more intense and more purposeful meetings has a powerful impact.
So,
again,
I know you're a research guru. So did you have any research? Other than just more the anecdotal and what you experienced as a sales leader, or?
Yeah. So I'd done some research with Sales Management Association a few years ago. It's pre-COVID for sure. And we looked specifically at this issue of practices and pipeline management. So we asked, types of meetings do you have? What's the agenda? How many people do you meet with? How often do you meet? How do you measure the pipeline? How do you set target pipeline sizes? It was the first time I was really kind of blown away with the concept of how important the pipeline is. So what we found is that 74% of this is all business to business sales forces. 74% of them expected their sales managers to meet with their sales reps more than once a month. So that's not uncommon. Like every 2 weeks, every week, you're meeting to have a pipeline meeting. And the average length of that meeting was 51 minutes. So let's think about how many meetings are taking place inside any average sales force on a week or a month. Like you could argue in some organizations, it's the biggest investment in time that management's making in sales performance, right? More than administrative, more than going on calls with people, more than, I mean, like literally hours and hours and hours a week are spent on pipeline management calls. And we also said that 91% of the organizations said that they had a team format for their sales pipeline meetings. Not that they didn't also have individual meetings, but 91% said yes, team pipeline meetings take place inside our organization. And so it's just to think of the scale of what, and anyone who's ever been in a sales force would know, like the sales pipeline is what we talk about. Like that's what we discuss.
That's right.
One meeting that does not get canceled, it's the pipeline review meeting, because
and you have somebody to cover you if you can't do it or attend, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
And all because the manager needs the information. Like that's why we're having these meetings. It's not smart.
Right. It makes it, and it turns it into a high value for the sales manager because they have to report up. But for the salespeople, it's a huge waste of selling time, right? At the end of the day, it's an administrative burden. Makes sense. Go back to that.
In this program, we basically had, so put people in groups, right? Doing a little exercise. It was like, okay, think about one-on-one pipeline meetings. Just think about it. List all the pros and all the cons you can come up with. And the pros, it's like one-on-one coaching, greater insight into the deals, blah, 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 pro. And the con is just takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's time consuming, but that's
time consuming, and there's no value, right? I mean, I think that saying is that, hey, you can sing somebody's accolades in public, but in private is when you want to really kind of admonish somebody, right? Or give them feedback, right? So that's always a good thing. So, but now, because I think you even mentioned something, I was thinking about CRM, right? So as a Salesforce consulting partner, big fan of using the technology, also working with AI now, so a whole nother story. But I'm just curious, how do you see CRM fitting into this? Or maybe it doesn't fit into the program, but I see it more as a potential consulting opportunity after the fact.
Yeah, well, CRM is integral to all of this conversation. I mean, without question, if you're at any size of an organization, you're going to have some CRM, right?
Right.
I very rarely bump into a spreadsheet anymore where people are actually tracking. That'd be a pretty small company with pretty unsophisticated management. So one of the biggest drivers of this issue, and again, I felt this as soon as I was in the CRO role, and the CEO starts asking me about, hey, what's up with that deal that we mentioned last week? Like literally the CEO is like holding on to these deals in his mind and expects me to have updates constantly, and I'm 2 levels away from it. And so, this is what drives you to have these meetings, because fundamentally leaders don't trust the information in CRM, right? In theory, CRM should have all update real-time information. So if I need to find out about a deal, I should go into the opportunity and look at the notes and look at the history, all the activities, and I should pretty well know, maybe there's still some color around the edge you need, but sales leaders just don't have confidence that the information in the pipeline is right. And that's why we get together once a month and literally go through the data that should be in the pipeline. So I think actually one thing that's kind of integral to this idea of letting go of the group pipeline scrubbing is the idea that people are compliant with expectations for CRM.
Mm-hmm.
And expectations aren't often made very explicit. So, one of my things is I tell my salespeople, I'm like, look, Friday afternoon, put 15 minutes on your calendar, literally put it on your calendar every Friday afternoon, and just go through here and see it. And in fact, I was even emailing at one place, I was emailing each person their pipeline in a spreadsheet so they could look through it very quickly. They have to go in and out of all the deals. I was like, every Friday morning, you're going to get a spreadsheet. Every Friday afternoon, you'll put 15 minutes on your calendar. It won't take any more than that to update these deals. Just do it, right? Even that level of expectation setting is something that not a lot of people have. So CRM is integral, because if CRM is done right and it's used properly,
right,
eases a lot of the demands. When a sales manager sits down and like, what do you want to know about the sales pipeline? They don't know what the deals are and what the close dates are, and because they're doing forecasting with it, obviously. They just want to know the data. You don't need a person to tell you. You just need a person to give it to you through the communication tool we know as CRM.
I think it also goes back to they want the data so that because someone else above them wants the data, right? I mean, if you're a chief, revenue officer, you got to report to the board or to the CEO or so on, just as you were mentioning.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why it's going in.
Actually,
Well,
there's one other thing I'll say about CRM before we move is, you know, most people don't think too much about their sales process unless they're implementing CRM. Like most people will not think about it literally until they start to implement CRM. They're like, okay, what are your stages? Right.
right.
This is where this conversation logically happens. And one of the things from the program that, again, that I strongly believe is not a lot of companies have really good definitions for their pipeline milestones.
Yeah.
And importantly, they don't have entrance and exit criteria, right? When does a deal move from lead identified into qualified opportunity, right? What are the exact qualification criteria? And this gets to sales leaders having more confidence in what's in the system is if we all are playing from the same playbook, right?
Right.
Called Pipeline Playbook is the name of the program. In fact, if we all understand the definitions and what goes where and when we move it from here to there, then I trust the data in the sales pipeline. So it's almost like CRM is driving a lot of process decisions. It should be the other way around. You should define the process and then CRM mirror it. But technology definitely drives a lot of definitional questions like that have an impact.
Or I've seen so many clients of mine that have taken what comes out of the box in Salesforce, or HubSpot, but Salesforce predominantly, and that's what they use. Well, our sales process it came with Salesforce.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, yeah, but that's not really how your customers are buying these days, right? I mean, and I think that's a great point. Do you see that this program helps them define their process, or is it kind of raise a flag that hey, they need to then define their process because it becomes a glaring miss?
Well, it provides some fundamentals. I mean, obviously, half day workshop, we're not going to redesign their sales process, but we can add some things to it. So, we make the point that this is really about the buying process, not the selling process. And
Right.
your
Okay.
job as a seller is just to walk the buyer through their process. So ideally, your sales milestones align with milestones in their commitment as a buyer. Right. So they're here, they're thinking about it, and something clicks in their head and they go to a different buying place and like, okay, I'm a little more committed to this. I need to learn more. Then something happens and they go to the next. Right. So part of the conversation is we need to really think through the buying side and make sure that the selling side mirrors it. Otherwise, we're gonna have all kinds of forecasting issues. If our milestones don't line up with an incremental commitment from the buyer, then the forecasting is going to be screwy. Um, and then we talk a lot about qualification criteria, like you need to have them, and disqualification criteria. So you can have, again, confidence about what's in the pipeline and what's where. And then the idea of when does it go from stage to stage, right? So
Right.
we introduce kind of like fundamental practices that we think would have an impact on people's confidence in the pipeline and improve forecast accuracy. But again, if we're engaging with a company one-on-one and doing some customization, obviously we want to do that. But as the program stands, it's really it's more instructive as to what they need to
So
do.
I mean, a
So
little bit sounds like it's a half day program, 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours, whatever it may be, and we can talk more about some of the content in there. Probably we'll share some of that in the notes here. But I would see that. I mean, in a half day, again, we're not going to redesign someone's process, but I imagine that they were going to start to see that hey, they can this process that you have, this pipeline playbook is going to help them improve their pipeline meetings, right? Their forecast meetings, pipeline meetings, right? Let me make sure I want to be clear on that. Is that I say pipeline playbook, but I think of that's also helping the forecasting engine a
Mhm.
little bit. Is that would you separate the two, or is that kind of be
Well, so it's not a forecasting program. A pipeline moves to a forecast when you start putting close dates and probabilities. Right? That's when you're using it to forecast.
right?
You have to do it. I mean, I downplay forecasting because I don't think it's a very value added exercise in most sales forces. It's just, but you got to do it. Obviously, this program is more on how do we structure the pipeline, have confidence in what's in the pipeline, coach so that people are getting things into the pipeline and moving them along. Right. So this isn't really about forecasting, though. There are some calculators on our website, which is actually the salespipeline.com. But there are some calculators that can help you identify what your ideal pipeline size is and also do some forecasting based on a few criteria, which are kind of obvious. It's sales cycle length, win rate, and quota or pipeline size. So
Mm-hmm.
so there's a little bit of forecasting in there, but it's kind of like an afterthought. But once we have the core data to size the pipeline, we can use that data and just engineer the math differently so that it spits out a forecast.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So, all right. So some of the things to think about too is so I was looking at so KPIs management, right? So so what we're talking a little bit of the forecasting, any reports? I mean, people have so many reports today. So much is available with Salesforce or any CRM. Data's, and that's part of the cracking the sales man. So much data. What would you say is like, does this program start to help you get to what's going to be the most important report or KPI that you need as a manager or sales manager?
Yep. So we do talk about what are my favorite reports for managing the sales pipeline. And
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
this is an idea of just how we get a holistic view of the pipeline. So there are 4 reports that I really think we need, 3 really, but I mean, one is kind of deals that are near, and this is the report we probably already have. Like what deals are closing in the next 60 days, closing in the next 30 days. Those are the ones we typically look at first on the spreadsheet because
Right.
it's forecasted, they're visible to senior management if they're large. Another one is new deals, which is what opportunities have been input or created in the last, or leads have been created in the last 30 days, 45 days, however long your sales cycle is, can influence how quickly you look at those. But this gets to the idea of, are they prospecting, right? Are deals getting put into the pipeline? And if it is, what kind of deals? And those are excellent to coach around. The next one is, and maybe my favorite is neglected deals. Deals that have been sitting in the pipeline with no activity against them for 15 days or 30 days or whatever, whatever your tolerance for it, again, based on how long your sales cycle is and all these other things. But you'd be surprised how few people can tell that there are deals with no activity against them. And people moan about it, like there's a lot of junk in the pipeline, a lot of stuff shouldn't be in there, a lot of the stuff is old. It's as easy as can be to run a report and say these are the opportunities that have no activity or logged against them in the last 30 days.
So many days, yeah.
But it gets back to the prospecting and follow through and things that make sales managers and leaders lose sleep. And then the last one is just deals that are known, right? Deals that need high visibility for whatever reason. They're a strategic customer or they're a large opportunity or whatever it is. There's a number of reasons that someone at an executive level would want to know a deal is in process. So it's kind of this idea of new deals, near deals, neglected deals, and known deals. And if you have all those looks on the pipeline, I think you get a pretty good sense of what's going in, how it's moving through, what's coming out. And it's many people have components of those, but not thinking of them as like, this is a set of reports I need to do my job or to give myself comfort with what's in CRM. So yeah, CRM does have a pretty big through line in the story.
Yeah, I could see that. And so, I mean, one of the things I was just thinking about is before we got together and talked, I was thinking about, so a lot of people do have some sort of like, well, as you mentioned, they all have calls. They all have a forecast call or a pipeline call already in place. How do you see this? Do you see it like doing a forklift upgrade on that process, or do you see it integrating into that process? What's your kind of thoughts there?
I'm not sure what you mean forklift.
Like forklift it up and just change it. This is going to be something completely new. We're doing something completely different. So forklift upgrade.
My experience has been that most people make changes to their rhythm, to
Okay.
to the cadence. I mean, changing reports takes time. Often someone else has to do that in the organization. Calculators and things like that are fun. People pick up on those pretty quickly. I think the biggest insight most people have in the program is my cadence of meeting is not great, right? Either I have these team meetings and whatever reason I have them. But I do want prospecting, and I don't have a meeting to talk about prospecting. I need to have that needs to be in the calendar somewhere to talk about prospecting, right? We're having these meetings, but I don't think the sellers are finding any value in them. Well, if you don't find value in them, then actually there's an interesting thing. So you know Neil Rackham, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I used to work closely with Neil and oh, I just lost my thought.
It was good though. It was going to be brilliant. I know it was.
Oh, well, it was from Neil. It's clearly going to be good.
Well, you'll come back to you because I think we're right in that point where I want to sort of say, what's the biggest impact? If you think there's a key takeaway, what's the biggest impact is going to be on the sales managers, and maybe that hopefully sparks, what Neil had said. So
yeah, so I've heard people ask in the past. It's kind of separate from this conversation, but it's related. Like, what's the one thing I can do to boost my sales performance? Like, what are the high leverage activities? And what I always have responded is, if you can just make sure that your reps are focused on the right deals, right, and they're not chasing the bad deals, then you can boost your performance of your sales team without any additional training, without any additional skills, without any additional tools, right? If you just focus the reps on high value, high likelihood opportunities and keep them out of all the junk, then you're doing yourself a favor. And so, I think the idea of having visibility to the pipeline and understanding what are good deals, making sure everyone understands all the stuff we just talked about. The pipeline is so present,
Yeah.
that you just got to find a better way to do it, because most people are honest with themselves. There's a better way.
There's a better way.
If everyone doing it great, they trust the data in CRM, they trust their forecast, they have confidence. There's the whole thing. We've talked about it again and again.
We've talked about it before. I mean, I mean, how many of our people that are probably listening to this, but also that we've talked to before in our engagements, is, they take the data out of CRM, put it into an Excel document, and then massage it, right? And that's what they're using for their forecast calls or the pipeline calls. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. So,
well, in defense of them, Salesforce.com, Salesforce is the #1 CRM vendor, and their resident reporting capabilities are not that great. That's why the whole ecosystem of reporting tools that sit on top of Salesforce, and I guess no CRM is really tremendous. And I'll tell you exactly, as it applies to the pipeline, here's something that blows your mind: is that you can't, as far as I've never seen it in the embedded functionality, run a history of the sales pipeline, because it's overwriting data constantly. It's not storing historical data. So you almost need to have some other, whether it's an Excel, and this is what I've done. The first very month, I download the pipeline and I go into, Excel and start updating the monthly information. So I got to have trend lines and things like that. So the reporting, in defense of people using Excel, the reporting that you want is not, there might be 6,000
because you are one, right? I got you, because you were using it. Well, but you're using it from a different perspective. That data is in Salesforce. It's the metadata that you can't easily get to. And supposedly they're claiming that, Einstein or some of the new AI engines will be able to help you get to it. But you're spot on. I think that part of the challenge, and we've talked about a little bit before, is that this report or this program, the Playbook, helps to simplify. I mean, back to at the premise of cracking the sales management code is Salesforce CRM's great, but it creates so much data. And now and because you think this data is important, but it turns out that it's not. There's literally, as you described, there's 4, right? Deals that are near, 60, 90 days out, new deals, prospecting type of discussion, neglected deals. Why is this thing stalled, and what can we do to move it? And then deals that are important or have high visibility or strategic, right? And so that's basic blocking and tackling. That's what you need to cover in these, and you're going to start to see some coaching opportunities that come out of that. If I'm a sales manager, it's kind of what I'm hearing. So would you say that's kind of the big takeaway? What would be any other big takeaways you have for this as a sales manager?
No, I think that is it. I think the takeaways are, look, the sales pipeline is the most important thing we talk about. It's the live opportunities. Like, someone's going to win, lose these opportunities. Might as well be us doing them. So we have meetings scheduled. We spend a lot of time on this activity. But if we look at what we're doing, we're kind of just, well, this is what my boss did to me 10 years ago, and this is what I'm doing to them, and then they'll do this to their boss. Like, no one's really stopped to think about, am I getting, and are my sales reps, more importantly, getting out of these interactions something that's valuable for them? Well, I know what I was going to say with Neil, this was. So Neil used to say one of his books was Rethinking the Sales Force, which talked about the difference between transactional and consultative sales motions, right? One, kind of product, high frequency, the other more consultative, obviously. And he would say that a good consultative sales call is when you added so much value in the call that the buyer would have taken out their wallet and paid you to have made the sales call, right? Like, you changed the way they were thinking about their problem or a path they were taking. That a true measure of how consultative a sales interaction is if the buyer would pay you to have interacted with them. And I think we could put that same measure on sales managers, right? I mean, if my interaction with a salesperson is so valuable that they would have paid me to have that interaction, right? I'm going to help them win more deals. I'm going to help them put more stuff in the pipeline. I'm going to help them think more clearly about strategy on certain opportunities. Like, if I think most sales people would pay to avoid meeting with their sales managers. Like, they would pay to avoid that painful 90-minute meeting where 10 people are going through their deal. So I take this consultative test and put it to a coaching test of what's a good coaching interactions, because the salesperson finds it so valuable. That's when you know you've done something.
And so I would infer then that this new program, Sales Playbook, and I'm going to go broad here a big, I think, is that this actually helps the manager become so that the salesperson finds a great deal of value of this new approach, this pipeline playbook model that you're talking about. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Let's go
well,
for
they
it.
should have, I mean, it's for the salesperson to have better confidence in their pipeline, have a cleaner pipeline, move deals through it better and faster, right? I mean, this is the whole goal of this is to win more deals.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, as again, once you start putting close dates and percentages on it, now you're forecasting. But as pipeline management goes, it's all about, hey, what are we working on? Is it good? How do we win it? You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Well, and that would naturally see a natural connection to it would help improve forecast accuracy, right? Because you're touching and having more clarity and having more discussions about these deals, right? And say, what's not real and what is. So that's good. All
yeah,
right, Jason, I love this. I love our conversation. We're gonna have to do more of this.
we
Maybe we have
should.
to pull a couple people in. Maybe we do a little demo of your sales pipeline program, or a couple people that have experienced it, and kind of have a debrief, right? Maybe we'll do something
Love
like
it.
that next.
Love it.
All right, bud. We'll look forward to talking more.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.